All right.
Morning, guys. This is Canine Freedom interview number either 11 or 12. I lost track. But anyway, I just wanted to want to do an introduction to my really good friend. I'm Jeff Scarpino here, and a little backstory. I met him at Heather's Beck's workshop in Vermont like a couple of years back, and like he welcomed me with big open arms. It was so nice. And then like seeing him at a conference in St. Louis in 2017 was just really great, and we just have great conversations. And yeah, Jeff's been a great friend, and I really appreciate having him be a network and a good close friend of mine. So I really appreciate that, Jeff, that you made some time for this. And why don't you go ahead and just talk about where you're at, what's your business, and what you offer or what you specialize in.
Sure. Right before I dive into just kind of that whole side of things, I want to give you a shout out, and I want to say while we're live and in front of everybody, congratulations on getting your CDT. That is awesome, man, and way to go through that process. So congratulations on that. That's a big accomplishment. So that's awesome to see.
Thank you so much. Well, I do give you credit though. You did help me out in like proofreading it and just asking the questions that I didn't see.
No, that's all right, man. You got that knowledge base, so that's really cool that you ended up doing that. Yeah, I'll give you kind of a brief rundown of who I am and what I do. So my business, and my wife and I, our business is Off the Beaten Trail, which is located in northern Vermont in a town called Newark. Myself personally, I've been working with dogs for roughly the last 10 years. And the process that it was for me is I started off just working down at one of the local dog pounds. And my original goal with working down there was not only to get more experience, but a lot of the way that I saw it was if this dog was going to go to a home and I was already the trainer that was working with the dog, more than likely, they would continue to follow up, for private lessons and whatever it might be. And so that became the natural progression of where it started was, started there in the pound, started working with the dogs. And what was really nice about that was any theory or anything that I was working on, I had a lot of dogs that I could work with and test them and say, well, hey, just because this works with this dog, does it work with this dog? So from there, I went into private lessons where, I was working in everybody's home and people would call me, and we'd schedule times to go back and forth. A couple of years into that, evolved into group classes. And so I started my group classes after that. And just at that point, I was offering, the private lessons and then the group classes. And so then I was about 3 to 4 years into that process when my wife and I started talking about opening up a kennel. And our thought process at the time was it would be a really nice segue from me training. I already had a little bit of a foundation for clients established, that it would kind of be the natural, progression of it. And so what we wanted for our kennel, and if anybody happens to be familiar with where I am, we're very rural. There's not a lot going on up here. We're really in the country. And so I wanted and we wanted our kennel to be in that same vein. We didn't want to be on Main Street. We wanted to be set back a little ways. I basically wanted a place like if you were going to send your dog to the country, it was out set up like that. So we ended up stumbling across the property. Oh, I don't know, maybe this was 7 years ago or so. And it had a little garage and a little house. And that's where we decided we were going to start. We both were working multiple jobs. And we didn't expect the dog business to be full-time. We really thought that this was going to be a little part-time gig. And so we took out our first loan. We transformed our garage into a very small kennel. We had 4 kennels when we first started, little indoor space, pretty large outdoor space. And things started to pick up really fast. It was one of those things that as soon as our doors opened, people started showing more interest. And so we did that. We expanded from 4 kennels up to 6 kennels. And at that point, I was working a couple other jobs, but the business was really starting to pick up. And so now what I was offering at that point was, my boarding, daycare a few days a week, private lessons, group classes. And it very quickly became, hey, we're going to have to let go of one of my jobs let's figure out what we're going to do. And so what ended up happening with me was I was offered the opportunity to work at a local veterinarian clinic for part-time work. And the other days that I had off, I could focus on building the business. And so that's what we decided to do. I stepped back from a really good salary job with a lot of benefits, took a massive pay cut and went part-time and started focusing heavily on the business. And now what was nice was I was also working at the veterinary clinic at the same time, and I was starting to get an understanding of, the medical side of dogs, which is really important, because the more that you can either understand a certain drug that comes in or understand a symptom that a dog might be presenting that is going to show you and give you more, knowledge, is really good. So I did that for about a year, and then the next big step happened because once again, I was working a part-time job, but my business was just growing and growing and growing. Once I got the support of the veterinarians, because part of my role there was I was sort of a liaison between other veterinarians in the area. And so I linked up with a lot of the vets. And as soon as I did that, the name really spread. So then we went full-time. We put an expansion onto the kennel, and we took what was the garage and we completely gutted it and redid it into a reception, a consultation room, the bathroom, and then the main kennel is actually set back from there. So we put our expansion on. The expansion was done, I believe, about 3 years ago. And, so now we've been full-time running that business for, 6 or 7 years out of that place. In the meantime, just in terms of the trainer side of things, continued education is always a big, important part of at least, my thought process and my ability to work with dogs. So I started focusing on getting my CDT. I worked my way up into that position. And then, I was elected to the board of directors for the IACP a couple years back. And so my progression through there has been a really cool thing as well. And, any trainers that might end up seeing this, consider joining an organization, because what happened with me was I was at the point of almost quitting before I recognized that there was a group of trainers and a support system out there that could really help. Yeah, buddy. So, that was a really nice thing for me. And, at this point, when I need to bounce information off of people or ask questions or do that, the ICP has been a really nice stepping stone for me for that. So now what I do is I offer consultations. So I do on-site, in-home, and phone consultations with people. I do private lessons on-site, sometimes in-home now. I have group classes that I do all on-site. I run boarding, I run daycare, I do board and trains. I have an online membership that's like a subscription-based membership for people that want to join that. We recently got an IACP CEU accreditation through the online schooling. So anybody that's has to have continued education units, our school just became approved by that, which is really exciting. So that's kind of the bulk of what I do. I was running socials for a long time, for a couple of years prior to COVID. But with COVID happening now, I did shut down my socials, which has been too bad. Because linked with my socials, I also did a leash class for my clients. So a little bit of that has tapered down for me, but it really ended up being an opportunity for me to once again reevaluate, refocus on my business, and move forward from there. So that's kind of a nutshell about what I do and kind of the area that I'm in.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, guys, if you guys are new dog owners, or if you don't have any trainers available, I really suggest that subscription thing that Jeff has, just because, well, of course I would be subscribed to it because I'm a big dog trainer nerd. So I watched most of his content. There's still a couple of things I need to watch, but nah, man, I love it. It's really cool, and it's really educational just to see. And yeah, I mean, you're vice president now, right, for IACP, or
January, yeah.
January, yeah.
January, which that's crazy. But I'm
I know.
excited about it. I'm excited to take
Yeah, that was just that. It was like no longer than a few months ago, or like, I feel like, or maybe, yeah, a few months ago, you were just part of the board. And then next thing I know, I just saw you were just like, you're going to be vice president. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I've been trying to wrap my head around that for a little bit too. I'm really excited to take that role on, but yeah, sometimes it's a little bit daunting to kind of say that that's what's going on and that's what's going to happen. But I have a really, really great working relationship with our current president, Melanie. And her and I are just really good at bouncing ideas off each other, and I have a really good relationship with the other board members. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, it's a little bit intimidating to say the least.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, pretty sure it was Melanie and then you that kind of pushed me to do my CDT anyway. So yeah, I mean, IACP has been such a blessing in disguise, man. It's just with all the networking and all the great trainers that I've met
Yeah, I
along
agree.
the way. And plus, it's just like a big Comic Con at that
Yeah,
point with dog training. So I love that place. I was so sad that we couldn't go this year, but
yeah, that was disappointing. That was disappointing. But we got a really good lineup for the next conference coming up too. So if for some reason there's people out there that haven't been to conference or anything yet, next year is going to be really good. It's going to be a good one. And
I'm
we'll be running
excited.
coach.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. It's in San Diego. I can drive there, and then I got a couple of people I'm gonna drag with me over there to San Diego with me, and I may or may not bring one or two dogs just to get involved. So I definitely want to do paper play recall with either the Belgian Malinois or the Chihuahua. So
I'll get that show out. You could race Martin, itty bitty, and your pup could start racing out there, which would be super fun to watch.
it's gonna be super cute. But my dog's gotta lose another pound or two so he can keep up with Itty Bitty because she is
Yeah,
hella
no,
fast.
yeah. And Martin, I think, has just been preparing and just waiting for his next opportunity. He's always working with that dog. It's cool to see.
Right. I know. Well, I'm so excited. Hey, hi Britannia. Haven't been yet. Cannot wait for next year's conference. Yeah, you better. Yeah, Britannia, you better go. I
Yeah.
definitely want to see your face over there. But yeah, guys, we're gonna talk about recall, like, or if no one knows the term recall, the come command, and we're just gonna talk about we're just gonna talk about the importance of it, and just Jeff and I are just gonna bounce back and forth on how we teach it, why it's important, or like how dogs, I think, perceive it in a way. And then feel free to just let us know you're watching, tune in, or comment below with questions, and then we'll try our best to answer them. And if you didn't tune in for the live, you can rewatch it, and you can just hit us up like on Facebook
Yeah.
Messenger, and just ask whatever questions that we didn't get to. But yeah, Jeff, what do you want
Yeah.
to start with recall?
So recall for me, it's my favorite thing to teach. If you were to come up to my kennel and see the area that I'm in, you're going to see that most people up here have their dogs off leash. Everybody's got a lot of freedom. Um, for me, I find a lot of personal enjoyment out of being able to hike around in the woods out here, having my dogs just be able to run, get a lot of that freedom. But it is really important to have a really well-defined recall. A recall can be a management solution for a lot of situations. If you got a reactive dog or whatever it might be, I think that a solid recall can be one of the best foundations to continue, going from there. And so I encourage people day one, if you got a brand new puppy coming home, 8, 9 weeks of age, day one, you want to start recall training. And the way that I do it, I link a couple different theories and stuff together. And so what I'll do here is I'll kind of break down for you guys the way that I teach a recall, and I've had a ton of success doing this. The first thing that I do from day one is I play on classical conditioning. So if anybody out there, is familiar with Pavlov's and Pavlov's dogs, I kind of modify this in a little bit of a way to teach the foundation for my recall. And I really encourage you guys, if you haven't taken time to learn about that exercise, do learn about it because it'll kind of make a little bit more sense of what I'm going to explain. The first place that I find that everybody gets in trouble when they're working with their dogs is they will wait for the dog to be, really far away from them, and then, here or come or whatever they want to use, they start to influence it there. So the way I explain this and the way I talk to people is I want you to find a very high value reward, something that your dog does not get until you're doing this training. So for me, I use a lot of hot dogs. It definitely depends on the dog's digestive system. But what I want you to do is I want you to take that piece of food, and you want to be inside in a room where there's no distractions. You're going to take that piece of food, you're going to put it right underneath the dog's nose, and you're going to take one step back. You're not going to say a word, you're not going to do anything. You want to see that dog move forward to you. Ideally, the way that I teach this, I do something that's called a focus exercise, where if the dog is sitting, I'll have food up above their head. Let me try to get this right. I'll have food up above their head. If the dog sits, my food moves down. If the dog jumps, my food moves away. And I don't say any words. I just do this back and forth so that it starts to develop a little bit of patience with the dog. So I do mix these two things together. But very beginning, food under the dog's nose, you step back. I want to see that dog come to me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that dog food. And when the food enters the dog's mouth, at the very same time that this is happening, I'm either going to say my command word, or I'm going to make a whistle, or whatever I want the dog to eventually associate with recall. So for my dogs, it's a whistle. So what I do is, as that food enters the mouth, you make the noise. I step back again. I let the dog come to me. Same thing. What I start to do here is I start to pair up the food with being in front of me. And what I try to explain to people about this is that every time you give your dog a reward, I want you to think of it like a photograph in the dog's brain. And the more consistent you can keep that photograph, the easier it is for that dog to understand what's expected later. So if every time I step back and the dog comes and sits in front of me, and I do my focus exercise and then I treat him, what I'm teaching the dog long-term is when you hear this noise, come sit in front of me and wait. Because that's my goal for this. What I don't want to have is a dog that's going to come to me, go, hey, you don't have any food, and then take off again. What I want is a dog that's going to come sit and wait. And then if I got to get a leash out, or if I got to get treats or whatever it is, I've already developed this at the very beginning. So hopefully this is making sense so far. So then what I start to do is for like the next week or so is I just have people practice inside the house for a couple times a day, those really structured sessions. So you step back, dog sits, make your whistle. Step back, dog sits, make your whistle. What I don't want you to do is dilute what you're trying to teach your dog. So if you're sitting there and you're working with your dog and you're like, oh my goodness, you're going to be such a wonderful dog. I can't wait for you to be outside. You're such a handsome little dog. Oh my goodness, I can't wait for this. You're so pretty. I'm going to show everybody that I know. What's happening when you do it that way is you're adding so much verbiage that the dog isn't sure exactly what you're trying to teach. So you want to be very quiet when you're doing this with an emphasis on just the word or just the noise that you're trying to teach to the dog.
Yep.
Let's say that you get a couple days in, a week or so into this process. What I then get you to do is I just want you to test your dog. So in the example of this is, let's say that my dog is, roaming around the house, make the noise and just watch your dog. If you see an ear flick or if you see him look, even if they don't follow through with all the way of coming back to you yet, this starts to give you a baseline of an understanding of, does that dog know that noise? Is that dog recognizing that noise yet? And then you get to kind of, make the judgment call on there. If my dog's doing really good with it, well, then we're going to move to the next level. If my dog doesn't have it yet, we're going to spend time on that foundation and conditioning that response, because that's what you end up doing with this is you're going through classical conditioning. And so what will happen is, like, I give it an example, is if you guys were, up here in Vermont with me and we're walking out in the woods, if I make that noise, you'll see my dogs just spin on a dime because it becomes conditioned into them. They hear this noise, this is what they do. And that's a lot of what Pavlov's study showed us, is that you can create a response to a noise. It's a matter of repetition with this. So my oldest dog, she's 10 and a half. I've been doing this with her basically 3 days a week for her entire life. Now, that does not mean I'm giving her food every time. And this is something that is very important and that I talk to people about as I'm doing this process, because you're going to get what's called a continuous reward system. And you're also going to get what's called an intermittent reward system. And this is usually a part when I'm talking or I'm speaking or I'm teaching people about this, that I do reference Robert Sapolsky. I did just in my group this morning put up a little video of Sapolsky and what's called the dopamine response. And this is a very important thing to understand, because this is how you create the dog wanting to fulfill this behavior, whether there's a reward or not. So to give a really brief explanation of this is, if you, every single time that you do this process with your dog, every time they come back to you, you're getting that same reward. In the brain, the dog's going to have a dopamine response, where basically they hear the noise, they get all excited, the dopamine fuels them to move forward. But if it stays the same, your dopamine is basically going to go up and then plateau. So if I get on a continuous reward system, there's only going to be so much excitement that happens with this dog. Eventually, what I want to get into is what's referred to as an intermittent system. An intermittent system is basically, in a nutshell, you are sometimes giving a reward, sometimes no reward, and then sometimes a jackpot reward, which would be a huge reward system. When you get into that, what you end up doing in the dog's brain is you spike dopamine by about 10 times the normal response. So basically what you end up thinking about is that dopamine is the anticipation of a reward. It's them wanting to find out if I'm going to get a reward, not the actual reward. And if you go through with the Sapolsky thing and you watch his little thing I put up today, all of the dopamine gets released at the signal. So later, after my dog has had this conditioned response created, let's say I'm out in the woods, or maybe they're in the yard or whatever, and I make that noise, that's the signal that triggers dopamine. Then that dopamine level stays nice and tall through the work, but then when you actually get to the reward is where your dopamine falls off again. So this is where I want to have this reward system set up on a trigger so that they understand, or a signal, or whatever you want to refer to it as. So as I'm going through this process, what I do is I create a really strong motivation with my dog. And now what happens here is that it doesn't always need to be a food reward. When I start transferring into an intermittent system, I actually typically play hide and seek with my dogs. And if you play hide and seek with your dogs, this gets your dogs to actively find you. So when you make that noise, it becomes come find me, come find me, come find me. So I'll do this right in the house, at the very beginning. Let's say that my dog is, not paying attention, doing whatever. I'll just step behind the door and make that noise. And then when that dog has to go through the work of finding me, when they find me, half the time I don't even have food. We just play. We make it a real fun game. We're going back and forth. And then I start to take that hide and seek game outside. So, if my dogs are in the, doing their thing, running around, I'll all of a sudden disappear and I'll stand behind a tree. Back to me. And it creates this strong motivation to find me. Because, it's either done through a reward system, it's done through play, whatever it is. I want them understanding that this noise represents this. Come follow through with it. I also back this up with an e-collar down the road. So if I have certain dogs, what's important to understand about reward systems is that a reward can be anything, but the dog is going to be the one that really figures this out. So like in an example, my Shepherd, I would give her like an 85% on her recall in most situations. She's really good at it. However, if there's a squirrel, more than likely she's going to chase that squirrel. That's a bigger reward system for her. It is really important to understand this with your dog, what's a higher value reward and what isn't. But for these particular dogs, I also will back this up with an e-collar. And the way that I teach e-collar, which a lot of people really are working with this nowadays and understand it, is at a very, very low level, the lowest possible level that the dog can feel it. I start to teach this dog, if you feel this and you look at me, it goes away. And then follow through with the reward system afterwards. So basically what ends up happening with this is if I have a dog that, wants to chase down a squirrel, I can start putting in something to interrupt that thought process and start to bring them back. Now, what also starts to happen here is this starts to become a signal for recall. This starts to become that very beginning of, ooh, he's got something for me, which again, if you link it into that foundation of motivation, you can start to get a really nice response out of that dog. So it is one of those things where I combined a number of things to create a very effective recall. But what you want to make sure that you're doing is practicing this over and over and over again. one of the things that people get in trouble with is they only practice this when the dog has a stress situation. And then all you end up doing is just layering in more stress because it's not a defined communication that we have with the dog. But for me, I do this all the time. I practice this so regularly that my dogs are so cued into that noise that when they hear it, man, it's a run and everything to get back to it. There are certain factors that people will do that slow down your recall. Dogs see everything in a pattern, and the beginning of a pattern always tells them the outcome. So if you only recall your dog to stick them inside or stick them into a kennel, well, pretty soon they're going to realize that the fun ends every time I end up doing this. So what I'm telling people to do is you have to be practicing with it and then let the dog go back and play again. Recall to me, go back and play again. And then eventually, you might move them inside, throw a lead on them or whatever it is, but you don't want them thinking that every time that you call me back, the game ends. And this is a place where I see people getting a lot, get themselves in trouble a lot. They let their dog out to go to the bathroom in the morning, they got to go to work, and that's the only time they call the dog in. It does not take long for your dog to figure out that's the process. Now, the other results or the other things that I see that people get themselves in trouble with is when you're first starting this process. Let's say this isn't with a puppy. Let's say this is like an adult dog that maybe you just adopted, which I just did at the beginning of COVID. I just got a four-year-old dog. If I was to, for the first couple of weeks that I was doing this training, let that dog run outside for hours and hours and hours on end, put in a little tiny bit of work, I'm allowing him to practice behaviors that are in direct confusion with what I want for him. I'm saying, hey, go outside and just, be out doing whatever you want all day. And then I'm putting in a little tiny amount of effort of saying, come back to me. So a lot of times at the very beginning part of this, you're managing really heavily what that dog is allowed to practice because you're trying to condition this response from them. And so, it ends up for me being something that, I absolutely love. There's nothing better to me than, going somewhere in the woods, making a noise and just hearing all three of my dogs just barrel in to get back to me. The thing that I also do with my dogs, and not everybody does this, and this is up to you, but typically what happens for me is all three of my dogs have to be sitting in front of me before the rewards come out. So I want them sitting and waiting. Because Ellie, my old dog, it's going to take her a little bit of time to get back. And I want them understanding it doesn't matter. You all are going to be here as a unit. We're all going to do this together. So that for me ends up becoming a rule that I have that I work with the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road, if I got a dog that has a really good recall, we might adjust and change a little bit of the foundation where I might not say you have to sit next to me for a minute or so before I release you again. But at the same time, if I'm in an area where I might need to get a leash on my dog right away, I'm going to practice, come back to me, sit and wait. I'm going to take out my leash. I'm going to put it on you. And then I'm going to take it off again, and I'm going to let you go be free. I'm going to practice as many things as I can in preparation for those situations, basically. So I kind of hope this gives you like a little bit of an idea of how I start to do my my recall training. And so just something to kind of think about. There wants to be a high level of motivation. And then once again, I'm going to be pairing this up with a lot of hide and seek games. I really want that dog having, an active want to find me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's where a lot of dog owners, I feel like they skip a step because they just, because they never thought of doing it in that way, just where you condition that dopamine, where it's just like when the dog gets you, come and just create that. Everyone just expects the dog to just come and call like right away, like instant gratification. And, I also find too that most of the time when dog owners are just calling back their dogs, it's either like when they're playing in the backyard or when they're playing in the dog park. And then, most of the time when they do recalls, in my area at least, it's always like when it's time to go home or when the fun's over. And
your dog figures that out really quick.
Yeah. And then it's just then the dog just figures out, oh, I just have to keep running around or just get away from you so I can stay longer, or it's just a marker for like kind of, I don't know, what would that be, like a negative punishment? Like you're removing him from the park, and then
It can be.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like they perceive it like that, where
Go the
they're
way to decrease the behavior. It definitely can be. I mean, it depends on how you would use it in context for sure, but it could be.
yeah.
Um, like one of the other things that I'm talking about with this too is I teach a whole group class on just recall. It's called the Green Mountain Dog. It's super fun, like my area. Like I said, we're in the middle of nowhere. But one of the things I see really classic for humans as we were doing this is, if you're the dog and I'm sitting here doing this exercise with you, and every time that I treat, it's your body language is going to stay the same. And what starts to happen with my class is, we go outside, and inevitably, the first time that I'm like, okay, guys, I want you to drop your leashes, let the dogs run. What happens is the person will call the dog and then panic. And what will happen is that dog will turn around and look at you. And if you're in this like, oh my God, that is nothing like what you taught that conditioned response. Your body language wants to stay the same. It's not a big deal. Back to me. Go through this. Run away again. So a lot of times when that dog actually turns around to see what you're paying attention to, and then you're in a very panicky mode, that immediately sends a signal back to that dog. And then, like you said, and then it becomes a chase game. Then you got to run around looking for your dog and chase your dog down. And this is, again, where I say to people, that game of chase, you want that to happen on you. You want that dog to follow you. So practice those games. This can be something you do in the house, the hide and seek games, the runaway games, stuff like that. But those are all allowing the dog to practice with following through and finding you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, if your dog can't come back to you when called at home, then there's no way that being out that he'll come back when you're in the woods or in a big, large open field with all these distractions like birds, other dogs, people. There's definitely got to be some form of foundation work that you gotta get them to practice with.
And you can get into the behavioral conversations with this as well too, and it really depends on the client and the client's dog that I'm working with. But like, let's say in an example, I have a dog that just kind of runs the roost, a lot of attention-seeking behaviors, very demanding of their owner. That dog's going to be less likely to recall to you because that relationship is built on what the dog wants, not what you want. And so there's a lot of times where you need to balance that equation. There needs to be a give and take between the two, so that when you go to influence it, maybe you're in stress and that dog runs your life and you're like, back to me. That dog's going to be like, no, I tell you what to do. I'm not following through with this. And so that's what's really cool about training is your training is basically just developing a language. And the more that you're practicing it, the easier it becomes to communicate. And it can be really simple. I mean, these recall exercises that I do with people are very simple, but they're very effective as well. Like I said, Ellie, I've been doing this for years with her, and it doesn't matter where we are. They'll pay attention to me. Now, another thing, just kind of on this conversation, some people are probably aware of it. There's a phrase out there called building your dog's bank account. And, the way that I explain this to people is like, if let's say that you give a treat to your dog and every time you give him a treat, that's $1 in a bank account. If I have a situation where I need to take a dog into what I deem a $300 experience, man, I better make sure that dog's bank account matches it. I better put my time in training before I step into that situation to make sure that it's very built up in your dog's brain. I hike my dogs a lot, and one of the things that I do with them, like right before we get out of my truck, you're going to focus on me. It's like, okay, let's go. So that I build up that bank account real heavy right before we go into a situation. I want those dogs understanding, reinforcing it. And then, follow through with your intermittent systems and hide and seek games.
No, that's a good idea. I mean, like, yeah, I think the other important thing is just make the exercises fun and just make it engaging for both the owners and the dog. Like, I'll have like one or two ways you practice if you're just by yourself with the dog. I have a couple of ways you can practice if you live like with kids or family. Like, I have this fun exercise called toss and dash, where you call the dog, you tell the dog to come, and as that dog is turning and running to you, and as he gets closer, like, I have them say yes or good boy, and toss the treat to the side. And as that dog is going to get like you're still marking the behavior, and then you're tossing the treat away from to the side. And while the dog is running to go chase that treat, you're gonna go. I have people just run to the other side of the house or like to the outside of the other room, and then by the time the dog eats the treats, they come and then just keeps that game going, and it's just like that chasing, just the fact. And this is in the house, and I get a lot of families that have a lot of kids, like either younger kids or like older kids, and they just love that game, and the dog is enjoying it too. And I even just have it goes from that to a simple like sort of how you're doing it too, but it's like Michael Jackson like moonwalking, just like say come, take a few steps, good dog, come back, say come, then just keep going in a straight line, backing up, and super simple. I also just work on like a send away, like I'll toss a treat away from me, just like free dog, come, yes and treat, free dog, and then like just really just super simple like that. And like when I have families or things, that we'll play like monkey in the middle, where there's two people and the dog's in between, goes back and forth, and then like go far, like start at a short distance and go farther out, and then like you go from in the house and you start doing this in the backyard, and it's like super fun. And then just like restraint recall, or my version of hide and seek, where I'll have one partner hold the dog, whether it's on leash or the collar or harness, and just that partner's job is just hold the dog until the other partner like is done teasing the dog and running to the corner or like hide in the bathroom or something. And soon as that other partner says Fido come, and that puppy or dog is really wanting to get to that person after being teased, then that's when the partner is just gonna let go. And I want like that dog to get some little bit of that frustration where they, by the time they hear it, it's like all systems go and just run and find them. And my clients with their families have really been enjoying that game. It's been really super engaging for both kids and the dogs. And then I just tell them just slowly just start inside the house, start in the backyard. If you have a big front yard, you can do that. Like you just gotta go bit by bit and just put everything together slowly, because it's just because your dog can come back to you in the living room doesn't mean he's gonna come back in a big soccer field. So it's all about just adding it up slowly.
I love getting the families involved. I mean, I've had situations where we've been teaching the dog recall, and we've been playing hide and seek, and I'll find myself like hiding in a closet with the kids, and we're all like not trying to laugh because the dog's trying to find us, and then everybody is enjoying it at that point. So like if you got the owners having fun and you got the dog having fun, they're going to be more likely to follow through with that training. And that's a really important thing to do. And to your point too, you know, one of the things I tell people is that dogs are very bad at generalizing. Just because they do it here doesn't mean they do it here. You got to be prepared to work with them in every situation. And the more well-defined that communication is, the easier it's going to be. You know, so repetition is important. But man, that sounds like a lot of fun with those games. I'm gonna have to keep that in the back of my mind. I've stolen a few things from you, like the wooden spoon, man. I reference you with that all the time. I get people with little dogs, and I'm like, man, my buddy Kevin taught me this thing. You got to try this. So I'm going to keep those in mind.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I learned that from a Petco trainer when she was like as my mentor when I was like being like a shadow student over there, and then she would get like that Kong toy, that like that long Kong toy, and it looked really inappropriate. It was like super weird. It looked like like those beads kind of thing, and she would stick the peanut butter at the end, and I'm just like, I think it'd be more appropriate if I were to use a wooden spoon. I was like, I don't think people will prefer I carry this long toy that looks like something else and let the dog away from it. It was just, oh man. But yeah, for the most part, that's like I do that with the puppies. I'll do that with small dogs, sometimes big dogs, depending on how much they love peanut butter.
Yep.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I've seen a couple of videos, I've seen a couple of ways, and then I just try to like that toss and dash game seems to be like the only thing that I've come up with that's like my style. There's a couple of things I do still want to like add to the toolbox, but no, it's been like I love teaching recall, and especially I do want to give some credit to like when I was watching some videos from Larry Crone, just the fact, you know, when I tell my clients now, like when that dog turns to you or like turns the direction from going straight to like turning back to you, that's when I'm like gonna say yes or like
Yeah,
good
totally.
boy, and then like get in there, and that dog immediately just turns like, oh okay, I'm coming back. I
Yeah,
always
it's
give this,
a signal for fun, man. That's great.
yeah, and I give like this analogy to like everybody. Like if I said, um, if you're just like heading towards the door, and if I said, hey Jeff, get your paycheck, like as soon as you hear the word paycheck, you're just gonna turn back and merely just walk back and get the reward or get the pay from me. So it's like when I tell clients, like when you say your word yes, it's the same thing as if I tell you paycheck, and you're not gonna, and if you hear paycheck, you're gonna come back to seal the deal versus just like me bringing it to you.
Yeah, and that honestly, I tell people along the same lines. I always say to them, I'm like, envision something that you love and you find it to be the most rewarding thing. And I'll joke around. I'll be like, how about a steak dinner? Man, if every time I make this noise, it represents a steak dinner, you're going to be waiting for that noise and you're going to be excited when it happens. And no, I love the way that you phrase that. I'm going to steal that one from you too.
No, yeah, thanks, man. I was just like, I love making like human analogies just because people can relate a lot better. And but yeah, like same thing as you said. Like I'll bring string cheese, I'll bring hot dog, or I'll bring like really good stuff when just for recall. When it comes to like sit down, stay, that's like they'll get they'll get my regular like treats just like to differentiate. Like I know dogs can understand value monetary wise, but just the taste bud, just taste value, and it's like when you come back when called, you get filet
Mhm.
mignon or you get string cheese or you get rotisserie chicken versus like when the others, this is more important versus like everything else. But I mean it's but yeah, I mean I definitely load that recall with like a lot of high value stuff. Even when I go out hiking with my dogs off leash, it's like I'll still bring like one string cheese and split it between all those dogs because they go nuts for that stuff, man.
Oh man, I'm in the exact same way. In my personal opinion, I think your recall should outweigh any other thing that you have because it is a way to save your dog's life. If
Hmm.
that dog is running towards a road or whatever it might be, maybe you have a dog going to a reactive aggressive dog, or maybe your dog has issues with that. They should be recalling to you all the time. And, having that high value reward system to it, I think is important. And a lot of times, when I go out and hike, I will mix up what I'm using for food, like you said there, because I just don't want it to become boring and bland. I want one day they're getting hot dog, and maybe the next day they're like, we're getting filet mignon. I just always want them unsure and wanting to figure out what's going to happen. And that's where, like, when you get into that, the intermittent system and everything that we were talking about, that dopamine response, once again, it's not for pleasure, it's for the anticipation of pleasure. So if they're always just trying to figure out what you got, it's so much easier to practice these recall things, and repetition of it, and not having it become something boring is very important. You want to be, every time that noise is made, something great is happening.
Yeah, no, I no for sure. I also tell people too, you do a little bit wherever you go with recall, whether your dog's on the 6 foot leash or just on the 10 foot leash kind of thing. Because I it's not like, but I don't tell them to like over drill it where the dog gets like sick and tired of it. But if you're going for like a walk, casual walk, you just moonwalk it, or you back up and you say, Fido, come, yes, and
Mhm.
treat. Then like it's like keep going, and then do another one. Like make it more routine versus just like
I agree.
make it part of the whole interaction with you versus just like call your dog when you really need it. Because
Yeah.
when you really want your dog to come back, like chasing the dog, like the case of the dog chasing the squirrel or my Malinois Nova chasing the cat. When that really matters, the dog's like, nope, that cat's way more of a dopamine rush than you will ever give me.
Yeah, right, right. And it's important to understand that side of things too, man. I mean, I think those are really good points that you just brought up. And in understanding your dog or your client's dog or whatever it is, and knowing those motivations is huge. Like, in an example, you're talking about squirrel chasing. I know that if I have a high value reward on me and Lexi sees a squirrel, she's going to be going for the squirrel. The funny thing about my dog Lexi is if I say you want to go for a ride, she will spin on a dime and go back to my truck. The truck is the big reward system for her, which is super funny. And I use it. I mean, it's a management tool and it's a way for recall. And and it's like the more that you understand their personalities and the more that you can work with them and motivate them, the better response you get on it, which is really nice. I love recall. That would be the only thing I would teach for the rest of my life if I had to. I love being with dogs.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I would say like most of the time it's been really fun just teaching, but there have been like a couple of dogs that have just have a different personality to them where it's just like kind of like the breed. Like I get most of the Huskies. I have worked with one that was really food motivated and would come back when called. Well, most of the time, unless you're trying to wrap up and try to, like I have he's this Husky puppy in social and he's like super food motivated. He's so affectionate, but then like he'll come back with cold most of the time. But when it's about time, he's just nope. I'm just gonna keep running around. But I get so many of like those like Huskies are just like mountain dogs or just dogs that are more independent on their own and they're not as motivated for like the food. So it's just every dog really depends.
A good point though. You bring up a good point because I think that one of the things that could be a little misconstrued from what I'm saying is there can be consequences too. And this is an important thing. A lot of times when I'm raising my puppies or whatever it might be, I might use to back to me, but at the same time I also teach my dogs that need something is ending. So if I call for my dogs and they decide to just go nope, well at the very beginning a lot of times I have them on a long line and they're going to hear and I'm grabbing that line and we're going inside and the game's done. And so I do have consequences to a lot of things when it isn't follow through. It just isn't my main focus for them. I want them to understand that, hey, there's rules, but we don't have to go in that direction if you're going to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think you brought up a really nice point about frustration. One of the things I see a lot is when people don't have a large amount of trust for their dog, they're apt to constantly hammer that recall. And then if it's somebody that's learned e-collar recall, I find them being more on their collar than not too, which I think does end up creating a lot of frustration. If like you were out playing a game and you were just getting involved, then your mom calls you back and you're like, okay. And then you go back to it. And then it happens again. Eventually you are going to find frustration there. And I do think that's a very good point that you brought up because it is very possible. And you need to be aware of that.
Yeah. Or just like there's the occasional dog that gets out the door and then the person just yelling come and then the dog comes back and then the owner's just mad. It's like I make this analogy. It's just like if your mom's calling you but then she has like a slipper or something in her hand and just like would you run to her or would you run the other way? And I'm just like my answer is just like I'm running.
Yeah, exactly. I love that too. I mean, the more you can get people to think of it that way, the better it is for them because they're going to make better, decisions and everything with their dogs, which is really nice.
Yeah, and then it's just how the dogs perceive it, and then it's like I've told people that don't trust their dogs to be off leash. And I mean, there's so many different options that you could be doing, whether it's like a tennis court or like a big baseball field where no one's there at a certain time. Even there's this cool app that I saw. Oh, Kitty! Oh my goodness, she's got big. Oh my gosh, so cute.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was like, what are you picking up? Is that you only have big dogs? I was like, what?
I got some big dogs.
No, but like, there's this cool app that I saw. It's called Sniff Spot, and it's like Airbnb for like fenced off properties or like backyards. Like if you don't have a big property available to you, you can like you could put in your zip code and look at those things, look at what's offered in your area, and then you just reserve that yard, and then you can just let your dog go up there with a long line or maybe just off leash safely, and then you get comfortable that your dog's not going to get out, but you feel comfortable that your dog's not going to just get out and get in trouble, but it's like you have more confidence, so you can feel more reassured when you call your dog back. It's not the end of the world, or it's just like you have your long line. I mean, you just have to be smart with it.
Yeah.
that like while you're developing. It's like how you said how much you're managing the dog is getting.
You know, and I use a lot of long lines, and I tell people a lot that if you have your dog on a lead and you are holding that leash and you're practicing these techniques, you're not mimicking the freedom that the dog is eventually going to feel. And
Hmm.
so what I'm trying to get people to understand is if I got a long line on, at least that thing is hanging down and he's moving in a more natural way, you're starting to mimic the freedom better, which once again builds your muscle memory, the dog's muscle memory, and your confidence in those situations. But if something goes south and you got 50 feet to grab that dog, it's a lot easier than starting a chase game. So I like that type of stuff too. I do caution people on long lines because you can get yourself injured sometimes too, which is accurate for anything. But I do like a lot of long lines for mimicking freedom, big time.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I feel like you can just shorten the leash as you keep going. Like as I feel like you make progress, so it mimics that. And I mean, yeah, it really depends on every dog. Like I get a couple of clients that are just asking me like, when can I let them do something real, like a real world situation, or like how will I know he'll be ready for to go out and he'll respond really well. And I don't and maybe and like have clients asked you that like what do you usually say? Because I kind of have an answer, but I want to hear what you would say to them.
I tell people that you inevitably are going to have a situation where you're going to fail. So if you are so overwhelmed about failure, practice, 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 but understand it's going to happen at some point. The difference becomes if you learn from it. If you go out and you're like, oh man, my dog chased a car. Well, if you know that you shouldn't be near that road, or if your dog isn't ready for it, or you didn't manage that situation well, don't let it happen again. Learn from it. Or if you know
Hmm.
that you have like a certain point on your walk where something always goes south, learn from that. Don't allow it to happen because it's an important part of it is that inevitably you got to drop that line. At some point, you have to do it. Take as many steps as you can to be ready for it, mimic your freedoms. I actually typically find, and this isn't the case with all the dogs, but a lot of times I will be the one to drop the leash when I know that the dog is ready. And I take that first initial step away from the owner because I kind of find that when they feel that the trainer's ready for it, in their mind, they think they're ready for it. So it can kind of depend. But I tell them right off the bat, listen, at some point your dog is going to be difficult. At some point your dog is going to be interested in the scent. Learn from it. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I prep people, and I just say, hey, it's going to happen at some point. Don't stress on it. Learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tell people like if I can mess up, like my clients can definitely mess up twice as much just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm human too. So,
I
but yeah,
sorry.
no, no, I mean, you're totally fine, man. It's just, yeah, I feel like it's just a confidence thing too. Just how much confidence they feel, and like how
Yeah,
much
I
trust
mean
they
that's
have
the
with the
thing.
dog.
I love giving real world example of situations where either I've messed up or whatever it is because a lot of times I feel like when you have a client that's in the presence of a trainer, I think that sometimes they feel that we know it all, we've done it all, or our dogs are perfect, or whatever it is. And the more that I can be like, hey, listen, I've bumped into that situation. I had this situation. Like a really a great example. So for those of the people that don't know me out there, I at the couple months ago adopted a Great Dane Mastiff mix, and his name is Striker. He's 160 pounds. He's a real big boy, and I didn't want to have him on a leash. None of my dogs are on leash. I got a lot of land. I want him to run around and enjoy it. And so, I'm going through my training and I'm working with him. I'm doing my thing. But inevitably, I came to a point of where I had to drop the lead. I got to see what's going to happen. I need to know what the dog wants to do. So I'm out there on my long line, my big dog, and I'm just for whatever reason in that moment I was like, this is the moment. I'm going to do this. So I drop that leash, and he takes one look at me, and he looks around, and man, he takes off. And so Great Dane Mastiff, he's big, and man, his legs are long. He is across my front yard and into the woods in like 5 seconds. And I'm just staring at him and I'm like, what did I think was going to happen? Like, what am I going to do? Go chase this thing? Yeah, right. And so that's where it was like a really good learning moment for me. It was like, okay, hey, we're not ready for this yet. Even though I was like, hey, we're doing the work. Well, the dog showed me, hey, we're not ready for it. But eventually what started to happen is every single day we worked a little bit more, but I had to, do it. I had to go through that process and see, hey, what's going to work, what's not going to work. So, you got to have a little bit of trial by error at some points, but I am also a little bit more lucky in terms of recall with where I live. I'm not in a major city. I'm not surrounded by a lot of roads. I have a lot of freedom. My kennel itself is located on about 14 acres, and I got woods and trails and stuff that I use for recall. So I have a little bit easier of a situation than where I am than most people. But trial by fire sometimes makes me learn.
No, I definitely had my trial. Definitely had like my trial and error. There's like one time, and this was like when I was in high school. I put 4 of my dogs. I had a Shih Tzu, I had a Dachshund, I had a Corgi, and I had a Husky Pit mix. And we would go for like a 6-mile walk to the park because I had nothing to do as a kid, and people just saw me as the kid that walked dogs. And I would like do the whole classic of like teaching to stay, then rewarding the dog with come. Then I'm like walking from a distance, and I put my finger out like this, like saying not yet, but all the dogs assume I called them, and they all zoomed past me, and I was not ready for it. And then I had a dachshund that was like, I had the dachshund chasing birds towards like a little bit towards the road. I had a Corgi and the Shih Tzu that was like having zoomy, and then I had the Husky Pit mix who was terrible at recall, just like running, and then like I had to body slam the pity mix. Then I got her, and then like get everyone else. But I was just like, okay, I definitely won't do that. There's another time where it's like when I had Ahi the Chihuahua, and he was just having a fun time, and then I was just like, oh, we're like 5 minutes away from the house, no problem. He'll just walk with me. He'll just walk with me next to me if I take his leash off. Unclip it, starts having this little bit of a zooming, and then runs towards this supermarket that's on the side of the road, that's just like on the same side of the road as me, and he just goes right in, just like perusing around, and I'm like, I can't go in because I've got the 4 other dogs. And then this attendee just comes in, picks him up, and is like, "This your dog?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry about that." And I'm just like, "Dog." I was like, "You definitely don't get freedom for now."
Oh man. Well, because we're sharing nice, embarrassing stories about our dogs and everything. My first personal dog, I had a boxer lab mix, and his obedience and recall and all that was like really good. But I fell into the classic trap that a lot of people fall into. I was letting him outside in the morning. I'd go to work. I'd call him in. Eventually, he realized every time I called him, he was getting stuck inside. And my big aha moment that I needed to talk to a trainer who eventually became my first mentor was I am inside preparing breakfast to go to work in the morning. I let my dog Jib out, and he's out doing his thing. And I look out and I see like the classic example. There's the UPS truck driving and him just full bore chasing that thing up the road. And I just was like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Then there I am, out running down the road trying. There's like classic example. But man, all those things are how you learn though, And so now when I get somebody that says that to me, like, hey, my dog won't recall to me, first thing I do is, well, how often do you practice it? Are you just recalling him to come inside before you leave for the day? Are you only recalling him to stick him in his crate? But those failures, man, that's what you learn from, and you learn that our goal now is to not have people repeat our mistakes. So we got to go through those too.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, like, actually, there was one question that popped up. It's like, I like when you work with like those more independent breeds or those independent dogs, and do you get a couple of those dogs that like not as food motivated or like not interested with food at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like,
I actually the last couple board and trains I have, I've been laughing with my staff that man, they've been really making us dig deep. I got a pitty in right now who I consider to be pretty low drive dog. He was not interested in food for I think the first 5 days that I had him, and what his big motivation was play. The dog that I had before that one was not interested in food, was not interested in play. Tug was their reward system. So what I look at, and things for me have evolved a lot. It depends on how I work with the dog. But the first thing I got to find is I got to learn what the dog's drive is. So if I have a dog that their drive is to just be outside, let's just pretend, I might say to them, in order to get outside, you got to perform all these tasks. And if you do it, you get your reward. So sometimes you got to get creative with it. I know I feel like the last couple dogs I've had have really made me dig a little bit deeper. But you know the saying where it's the most difficult dogs make the best handlers. And so I think that when you bump into the dogs that either your current toolbox or whatever it is doesn't cut it, those are the dogs you either reach out to somebody else or you start thinking differently of how do I relate to this dog.
mm,
I had a little Chihuahua mix that was in my place for a couple of weeks, around a month or so ago, and I stressed more on that dog than I have in a long time. I was lying awake at night, just kind of pulling my hair out because I could not connect with this dog. I could not figure out a way to get him. Eventually, what I started to figure out though was I started to just observe his behavior and I watched what he was doing as a self reward or what he was doing as self motivation. And then I slowly changed that to be onto me. My program, I don't think, do you do board and trains at all, Kevin?
I did like before, but after we talked last time, and then I moved from how I switched. I moved to a different house later December. I was just completely burned out with like boarding trains and
Oh yeah,
boarding.
not for everybody. You
Yeah,
know,
and
and I don't
yeah,
take on a lot of them. I only do either one or two at a time. But a lot of times, what happens for me is if I have a dog that I know, because a lot of people contact me initially for consultations, and I have, my consultation forms at this point are multiple pages, and they allow me to check a lot of boxes. And if I see something that I know that I need to spend time with that dog to find the motivation, is typically where I end up in a board and train because I am able to be around that dog for a lot longer time frame. Um, but don't be afraid to tell those owners right off the bat. I mean, that's one of the first things that I do with owners is I talk about what's been good or what's been bad or what I'm recognizing that is going to be a holdup on them. I think that when I first started just doing even training or even board and trainings, failure is a big scary thing. And so that I think that a lot of times if you weren't getting the progress that you wanted to see, like I would take it real personal and I'd be shut down for a long time because of it. Now what I've learned is I need to address that with the owner and say, hey, listen, these are where I'm seeing the faults. This is what I would do to continue that or whatever it might be. But you're definitely going to bump into those dogs that aren't going to, conform with everything that you normally do. And you know what? I mean, I've had dogs in the past where I've been teaching recall, but they were such an ADD dog that I actually went to a transitional leash and just taught them sit next to me. And then I rebuilt a foundation from there. So, in that example, I had to go into a more aversive style of things just to be like, okay, we need to slow down for a minute and then rebuilt it. So, there's different ways to tackle it, but, getting creative is always a good way. I hope that made sense.
yeah, no, yeah, no, for sure, man. I mean, that's sort of um what pushed me to like do these kind of interviews. It's just because I had certain things that I wasn't sure of or just wanted some reassurance, and then just bouncing back between different trainers just about like their point of views and like what else I can do. Like, I mean, like before we went live, I was like telling you about all the several different dogs that I have to deal with, that I have to work with, and all of that, and just I mean, that's the fun part, but that's also why people pay dog trainers. It's just to have them problem solve and figure that out, and then tell them what's the diagnosis or tell them what's happening. Okay, it's like
You know,
here approach it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to your point, I mean, the bigger that your toolbox becomes, and the more that you can actually spend time practicing something so you know it very well, then you don't get stuck in, well, if this doesn't work, what do I do? You know, that's where you might come back to that. But that's one of the things that I really like at this point in my career is I've had a lot of time just learning and trying and doing things differently that if I do bump into it, I at least have other things to draw on. And that's where I get really nervous when I find people that are this is the only way I do something and this is what I'm going to do forever. You know, well, that makes me kind of nervous then because what happens if, like, you know, you bump into that dog that doesn't work? What are you going to do? You're going to send that dog to someone who might do something bad to him? Like, you know, you never know. And that's where I really feel that as much education as you can get into yourself is for the best. And, you know, just a little bit of a tie back. That is why I ended up finding the IACP was for the education side of things because, man, I tell you, that's my favorite part about dog training is you can't get all of the knowledge. And man, I love to learn. I love to read. I love to study. And there's no ceiling. You can learn as much as you want to. You can be your own motivation. And I've been watching you do these series, and I was thinking the other day, I was like, man, Kevin is learning so much. I mean, he's getting all these people like a little bit that I'll tune in here and there. I'll learn these little things, and what a great thing that you're doing, man. That's really cool.
No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I felt because there are a couple of dogs where there's like one or two dogs where I just felt stuck or I just didn't know what to do, and I'm just like, um, my my cap was just like not looking at all the different angles, and then that's why I wanted to like share this for like those certain clients, and then just clients in general, and just people in general, just watching, just getting more education out of it, and of course, just me connecting with dog trainers is always fun as well, and it just expands like how you said, if you're running into a dog like this, either reach out to somebody. Like if someone asks me a question about their dog and I don't know, I literally be like, I don't know, but I could reach out because I'm grateful with like the IACP Facebook group. I'm glad I have different networking, so I can proudly say like I don't know the answer, but if you give me like a week or so,
Yeah,
and I
right.
can talk to some of my colleagues, I will get back to you with hopefully with a good answer or something. So
That's a good
sorry.
thing. That's a good thing.
And yeah, I mean, it's just like there's, like how you said, there's so much different information, and as much as I'm learning, and like how, like even in my days off, I'll be watching dog trainer videos just because it's just more fun for me. But I definitely learn, but I definitely need to practice more,
Sure.
and
We all do.
and because it's like with the business going up, like my dogs, I don't practice as much with them, or I
Hmm.
don't do as much.
You ever hear the shoemaker's son? The shoemaker's son had no shoes because the shoemaker was making shoes for everybody else. That's how I
Yep.
feel with my own dogs. Shoemaker's son. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, totally. It's just like because there's a couple of things I would love to do with like my Malinois, like my Chihuahua. I want to do like more tricks. Well, it's just, and then I feel like giving like the bare minimum, like
Hmm.
a quick ball, like a 30-minute ball session out of like several hours in a day because I'm like working for 6 hours, working with several clients, and just not giving enough. And then it sucks with COVID that we can't really go to like the off leash area that I would go to in San Francisco just because they shut down the parking lot and it makes parking extra hard. And so it's just trying to innovate, see what else I can do with them. But yeah, I mean, as a dog trainer, for me, it's like there's several things I want to work on, whether like from my foundation with like leash walking to like certain things like resource guarding and just how I run my group class. There's just all these different things I really want to like spruce up. And then but I'm signed up for all these different dog training things. And it's just like, there's so many different routes, you don't know where to go.
Yeah, yeah. It can be a rabbit hole that you can fall down. That's for sure.
Yeah. So it's just, it's really fun, but it's also just overwhelming if like you go one person that says like, this is the way, no, this is the way, this is the way, and then you have to like put it all together, and it's like one big recipe that just blows up in your face.
Oh man, I think that happens a lot, and I think it's very normal. You know, I've said to people a lot that I think that there was times earlier in my career where I was either trying to be somebody else or I was trying to train like somebody else. But once you really develop your own style and you have your own personality and you understand it to a really good depth, that's when I think a lot of things, you know, they really just start to evolve for you and become a little bit better. And so I think it's pretty natural. You know, everybody will kind of find somebody that they appreciate and kind of, you know, mimic them for a little while. But, you know, the more that you develop your own stuff, I think the better you become in the long run, because then you're actually critically thinking about how does this work? And
Yeah.
then one of the other things that I really liked was someone was saying, I can't remember at this point who it was, but they talked about, you know, once you develop your own style, if you can prove that it works with every single dog, then man, you got something there. So that's once again, what's kind of nice with my kennel now at this point is, you know, I get tons of dogs that come through there, and I can test and I can check things and I can look at it and I can see how does this one respond, and that is a nice advantage that I have of being able to be immersed in dogs 7 days a week for as long as I want it to go, because it allows me to test a lot of theories, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I almost just want to like take time off like a week or two, just where it's like, let me just take this 2 weeks off to just work with my dogs and see what works, what doesn't work. Or like I almost like wanted to be like reach out to a client that I felt like I could have done better if I had worked with them, if I learned now, and just be like, hey, could I borrow your dog for a few hours?
You
I won't,
know,
I won't kind of
and
thing.
no, I agree with you, man. I think that when you really care about what you do, there's always certain situations that stand out in your brain where you could have done better. And I know of situations that I've gone through, or ways that I've done something that I was testing theories or I was testing, you know, examples of training, and I was not satisfied with the results. I could tell that the owner wasn't satisfied with the results. And as much as I hate it, and it still drives me nuts, even though it's probably been years at this point, that stepping stone made me realize this is not the appropriate path to go for me. I had to go through something that, you know, maybe wasn't the best that I could have done to make sure I didn't do it again. And
Hmm.
I do think that sometimes people don't realize that as dog trainers, there's a million different directions that you can go. And if you really are trying to better yourself, you are going to be practicing a couple different things here and there before you figure out, like, this is what I'm going to do. So I have those. I'm sure everybody has those that really cares about what they do, but those become your motivation, and those become the reason why you know you keep getting better, and you find the people that you connect with, and you find the people you want to learn from. Because there can be people that out there that you don't want to learn from, and you think you do, and then you start, and you're like, no, that's not me. And you got to be true to yourself. You know, being true to your own personality is very important.
Yeah, I mean, just yeah, you have to be like your own individual, but you get like some help or ideas from other trainers. Like you have to make it like your personal flavor in a way. But
Yeah, exactly.
and I just feel like yeah, definitely. I feel like dog trainers need like time off, where it's like a time off where it's like either you're doing something really fun or you're just going back in you're going back in the laboratory and just seeing what works and like what else you can be doing to improve on things. Just because like back in the day, like when I was like trying to figure out what to do, or like when I could not like figure out how to stop a certain thing with dogs, or just like, and I was just having dogs boarding with me while I'm like working and coming back home, and I just want to relax or get a break, and then I get stuck with dogs to take care of. Like I was just not in the right mindset, and I would get so frustrated. And like I think Chad Mackin was like talking to me about this like on a separate thing where, you know, it's that ape brain that you just get mad, and then you like emotion is such a hard thing to control, hard thing to grasp. It's just like if we can't control our emotions, like I don't like I can only imagine how it is for the dog, you know. It's just like that emotional aspect. And for me, it was like I've been heavy handed with a couple of dogs, and you know, I go back and I'm just like I don't feel good about it. And it's like whether it's like a smack in the butt or just like, you know, really just scruffing them, and I'm just like, oh my god. And then I would look back at them and just like, oh, and I would almost just want to go to the church and be like, forgive me, Lord, I have sinned or something like that. But it's like I try to I keep it in that sense. Just I keep looking back to it, and it just keeps me from not doing the same things that
Yeah.
not doing right now. Like I definitely a big last year was my big error, trial and error, where I learned, okay, boarding is not the best for me. Boarding train is not my best thing, just because there's so much pressure. And then I would come back home after a long day of work, and I got to work with this dog. Then my dogs weren't getting the attention or putting up with the dogs that had problems that were in the same household as them. And then it was just like I had just had to find my niche, which is more private lessons and just more like day training. And like
Well,
after that, yeah.
Oh no, keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, but then after moving out of that house situation that I was telling you about, like a year ago, and going back to having my own house, no new boarding dogs, no random people coming to the property unannounced, and then just my dogs, and then just taking time off a little bit every month, like how you suggested and all that. It's just been so much more relaxing. I can actually think, I can actually breathe, you know. So it's just
Well, I tell you,
it's been a
that topic
transformation.
right there, what you're talking about right there, was something that I brought up when we were discussing what was supposed to be the conference for IACP this year. We were supposed to have a business panel because what I've kind of learned and what I've been seeing is a lot of the people that are upcoming in the industry right now feel like I got to have a facility. Oh, if I don't have a facility, I'm not going to make it. Or I got to do an online membership or whatever it might be. And we wanted to have a speaker panel of somebody who does small kennels, someone who does large kennels, someone who does in-home, someone to help with marketing, someone to help with finances, so that people could come and realize you don't need to do this big facility or you don't need to do this. There are ways in the dog world to do it. You just have to be creative. And, I think that was something for me that I wish I had had more of an understanding of. I absolutely love what I do with the kennel, but man, I tell you, it's not for everybody. 7 days a week, you work holidays, you work weekends, you're going all day, all the time.
Yep.
That has a lot of burnout. And, maybe we'll have a separate discussion on burnout or something at some point, but that's a big part of it. It's a huge part of the industry, and, being aware of it is very important.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I keep telling myself it's like before I get a facility, or maybe I might not get a facility, I just might enjoy the home lessons and just how small it is now, because I have more flexibility versus like when you go big,
Dude, there's a
you're
lot
gonna yeah.
with it. I remember, man, my wife and I were just joking the other day. I can remember we had 4 kennels, and it was so different. I mean, it was just so different having small amounts of dogs. I don't even have large amounts of dogs compared to some of the other people in other facilities out there, but it's very time consuming, and definitely enjoy your time while you can, especially if you think about going into the facility realm. It does, offer advantages in other ways. But it's an important thing to understand for sure.
Sure. Honestly, I feel like if I were to team up with a boarding place and I had more flexibility, probably that might be my route. The closest thing to like having a facility, just because California is expensive enough, and just I don't want to go through all the tax and all the paperwork and all that. I'd rather just have someone just do the paperwork and all that for me, and I just help out in that way. But
Yep.
actually, for some reason this question popped up, and this is because of a puppy client yesterday. I had this. It was about recall, where it's like if the dog was just laying in the kitchen and tried to call the puppy up to the living room. The puppy just looked at him like, nah, and just was nonchalant. Um, so I was just, so I was like, well, probably she wasn't in the mood to come back, or she was just trying to sleep, or I don't know. It's like, you want to give your dog a break, or maybe you just let your dog drag a leash. So then, if you want to follow through with the recall, just tug on the leash. But like, I don't know. What are your thoughts with dogs that are just chilling at home, or just like when you're just trying to casually call your dog to come here, and the dogs are just they're just like, nah, I'm good, kind of thing.
It depends on the situation. If I had a situation like that, like a great example. So my dog Lexi, she will be outside all day long. That dog just loves to be outside. It can be raining and snowing. That dog just wants to be out there. She loves it. But if there's times where I'm like, hey, we have to go or we have to do something, I'm going to follow through and I'm going to move her inside. If it's going to be difficult, hey, this is what I need. This is what I want to have happen. So there is a really fine line with it where, in an example of a puppy, that dog could have been overtired and it might not have been a good time for learning. If I have a more adult dog or whatever it might be, it kind of depends a little bit. But a lot of times, if I'm working with a client and we don't get exact follow through, that's okay. And I make them understand that, hey, this is going to happen. You're shaping behavior, which means you're just always molding that clay. And it might just mean that that's a situation where I go into more lecture-based training as opposed to, example-based training. So It kind of depends on the situation. But man, if you need to follow through, the dog does learn that if they don't follow through with it, there are consequences to it. I do think that that's an important side of things too. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but it is important.
Yeah, good point. Good point. But yeah, I think we had a good conversation about recall. What do you think?
Man, I love talking with you. I love talking recall too. So I appreciate inviting me on. I would jump on and talk to you again if you end up having time. I love doing stuff like this. I know that you're becoming super busy with all these. So in the future, we could always talk again. And hopefully,
I'll make time for you. I'll make time for you always. Like
I feel the same way, buddy. Anytime.
Yeah,
but, hopefully at the beginning of this, I was able to articulate my points well with how I teach a recall. If there's anybody out there that is struggling with recall and wants to talk to me a little bit more in depth, please by all means reach out. I do have my online membership where I have taken a number of dogs through board and trains that I have specifically for recall. I have a whole bunch in that membership. But I have a nervous Dane that I did e-collar training with for recall. And I have a more confident little lab puppy that I took through the same thing. And so I try to showcase what different dogs are going to look like in there. So if anybody needs help, check it out or message me or whatever.
Yeah, and guys, if you're up in Vermont area, hit up Jeff. He's awesome. If you're up in Northern California, can hit me up, Canine Freedom up there in Santa Rosa. And yeah, guys, I hope this all makes sense. And just feel free to just hit us with messages or questions of any sort. I'm also going to put this on YouTube. I'll also leave links for his Jeff's online course and his website on there, so you guys can check it out as well. But yeah, I think we'll wrap up. And Jeff is always so nice talking with you. It's I really appreciate it. And he's just flexing with the shirt right now with my logo.
That's right. I'm like stuffed into this thing. I got a smaller one.
Oh man, I'll get you a bigger size when I see you in San Diego.
That's all right. It makes me look huge.
Yeah, you work out, man. It just makes you look like you beef up.
That's awesome.
All right, guys.
It was great talking with you. And like I said, if I could talk again at some point, I'd love to.
No, I'll hit you up. I'll text you sometimes, and we can definitely do this again. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks guys for tuning in. I hope you all have a good day. Yeah. All right, guys. Peace.